Good morning. How's everyone doing this morning? Doing good? Well, my name is Pastor Mike, and my wife Susie and I are the lead pastors. If you're a guest here with us this morning, as Susie mentioned earlier, if you could just fill that Connect card out for us, take it to the hub, get your free gift, mark whether it's your first, second, or third time. We just want a way to bless you and say thank you for spending your morning with us. And I want to invite you to come back next week. Right now, we're in the middle of a series called Dream On. We're looking at the life of Joseph. And man, I'm excited for next week because do you find yourself maybe giving up on your dream? Have you found yourself just getting a little bit tired, maybe having a hard time finding the motivation to follow through on the dream that God gave you? Or maybe you're on the path that God has for you, but it just looks like it really doesn't lead to the dream that God gave you. In fact, you're encountering maybe a little bit more adversity than open doors. So then what? Well, we're going to take a look at these next week, so I want to invite you to come back as we continue our series, Dream On, next week. Bring a friend, invite a family member. It's going to be a great morning. Today, we are in week 2 of our series, and the title of my message is A Dream Delayed. A Dream Delayed. Now, who here, no, I'm not going to ask, because I don't think anybody would raise their hands and say, yeah, I really enjoy delays. Especially if you're traveling. And my family knows that I take vacation very, very seriously. I take my work and my job very seriously. I work hard, but I also believe work hard and play hard. And so I take vacation I'm probably more excited the days leading up to vacation than my kids. And it doesn't matter where we go. I just love getting away and going on vacation. Well, I actually started scrolling through some pictures because I would have, if I had talked to Susie, said, yeah, it was probably like 2 years ago, but it was actually like 4 years ago now, or even 5 years ago, back in 2019. It was the day it was the last day of school for our kids. We were going down. As soon as they got off the bus, we jumped in the car. We were heading to the airport. We were flying down to visit Susie's parents that live in Florida. And so, everybody's excited. Last day of school. We're taking off, getting out of here, going on vacation. And we get to the airport, and we get up to the counter to check our bags, and they're like, I'm sorry, your flight's delayed. And I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And I'm like, all right, until when? They're like, tomorrow. I'm like, no, not happening. You're going to put me on a plane tonight. Just send me anywhere. And they're just kind of looking at me like, what do you... And they're just kind of giving me this strange look. I'm like, I'm not going back home. I'm on vacation, and you're going to send me somewhere tonight, and then from there you can send me to Florida tomorrow. And she's just giving me this blank stare, like, are you? I don't know if you're serious. I'm like, I'm serious. Where can I go tonight, right now? And it's kind of later in the day, so there's not a ton of flights. And she's like, kind of going through. Well, I think we could get you on this flight that goes to D.C. I'm like, perfect, thank you. And she's just looking at me really strangely. I'm like, and so they fly us to D.C. We get in around 9 o'clock. They get us a hotel because, they messed up and had to delay our flight. And so we get in a hotel, we drop our bags, and it's actually the first time I've ever been in D.C. I'm like, well, let's go see what our nation's capital has. And so we take off, we go see the Washington Monument. And then we're like, all right, then we got an Uber and went to the White House. And I was there with our family, and I actually have a picture. Addie and I are literally taking a selfie in front of the White House. I literally click on the picture, and then boom, the lights go out. It was about 11:45. Actually, I know it was 11:45 at night. All the lights go out around the White House at 11:45 p.m. And so I was like able to just snap that picture just in time to catch the lights on. But nobody likes delays, right? Nobody likes to oh man, you're gonna have to delay your flight, whatever it is. Nobody enjoys those. Well, when we're looking at the life and talking about Joseph, that's exactly what happened, because last week we read how God gave Joseph a dream. God gave Joseph a dream. We talked about it last week. You can go back and watch the message on YouTube if you weren't here, weren't able to watch it. But essentially, Joseph has this dream, and he explains it to his brothers that, he had these bundles of grain, and there's 12 of them representing Joseph and his 11 brothers. And Joseph's bundle of grain rises up as everybody else's, and then all the other pieces of grain, bundles of grain bowing down, symbolizing that at some point that his brothers are going to bow down to Joseph, and then actually he has another dream where his parents are included in this, and they're bowing down to Joseph. So God gives Joseph this dream, essentially saying that at some point in your life that you're going to rise to this place of authority and power over your family. And so this is what's going through Joseph's mind, and he has this dream. Well, Joseph is about to see his dream being delayed. His dream being delayed. So I want to kind of walk you through just a little bit of what's happening in chapter 37. And I want to walk through a little bit of verses 12 to 25, because after Joseph has this dream, the Bible tells us that Jacob, the father, sends out his 11 brothers to go and take their flocks, their herds, their cattle, and take them out grazing, feed them. So they go, but they don't, go, out in the backyard. They're going like 50 miles away. So, I mean, it takes days to get these herds to travel that far. And so his brothers, they're a long way off. And then a few days later, Jacob says to Joseph, all right, I need you to go check on your brothers now. Go check on, see how they're doing, make sure that everything is good. So again, this isn't, just going to the backyard. Joseph's got to travel, probably at least 2 days, 50 miles. He's walking. And so Joseph, he's going out to check on his brothers. Well, if you remember last week, I talked about how Jacob made this really colorful, ornate coat to symbolize and show Joseph that he is the favorite in the family. So his brothers, because he's wearing this colorful coat, see him coming miles away, right? Remember this bright, colorful coat, and they're like, well, there's Joseph, and so they could see him coming a mile away, and well, his brothers, they actually say, you know what, we're so sick and tired of Joseph, him being the baby, always getting his way, he's a favorite, and then dad makes him this coat, and they're not just envious of him. In fact, they decide, we're sick of this. Let's get rid of him. Like, we're going to kill him. And so as his brothers are watching Joseph come towards them, they're literally plotting to kill him. Well, one of the older brothers, Reuben, he kind of speaks up and says, listen, let's not have our brother's blood on our hands. Let's not kill him, all right? Let's just throw him into this pit. Let's throw him into this cistern. And so Joseph comes up, he's all happy, joyful in his nice, colorful coat, and his brothers strip him down, beat him, and then they throw him into this well, into this cistern, into this pit. And they're sitting there eating dinner. Joseph's in the pit, in this well. It's empty, it's dry. The Bible tells us it's summertime, and so it dried up. And so he's sitting there in this pit. His brothers are sitting around the fire. They're eating, and this is where we're going to come to the scripture this passage I want to concentrate on. In Genesis 37, verses 26 to 27, it says this: Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, come on, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. How nice of them. And his brothers agreed. These guys are just stand-up guys, aren't they? They're so nice. We're not going to kill you. We're just going to sell you into slavery. And so that's what happens. These Ishmaelites come along, and the Bible tells us that they sell their brother into slavery, and he's taken to Egypt. Joseph goes from this God-given dream of where you're going to be placed in this place of leadership, of authority and power over your brothers. Well, now actually you're sold into slavery. He's actually worse off now than he was when he had that dream. Sold. The Bible tells us for 20 pieces of silver. And I've said this previously, is whenever you're reading the Bible, most of the time the Old Testament is foreshadowing what is to come in the New. Sometimes it's foreshadowing Jesus. Sometimes it's foreshadowing things that haven't even happened yet, the second coming. But if you actually look at this story and in the entirety, that this is actually foreshadowing what happens to Jesus. Because Jesus is sold out by his brothers, his disciples, Judas, right? He's sold out by one of his brothers, one of his disciples, Judas, for what? 30 pieces of silver. Same thing happens to Joseph. It looks like it's dim, that it's dark. It looks like it's leading to a place of death. Well, for Jesus it was, but it looks kind of grim. The outlook doesn't look very good. It's foreshadowing what's going to happen. And Joseph has to be wondering, well, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong to be sold for 20 pieces of silver into slavery? Because it would seem that he's further away from his dream now than he ever has been. Have you ever felt like that? That I'm doing what God has asked me to do, but I feel further than I did last week, last month, or maybe even last year. And you're wondering, am I ever going to see that dream that God has given me? And maybe even start questioning, well, is this dream really from God? Or was that something I just came up with in my own mind? So, some things that, I want to look at some things that we need to know about the delay of a dream. 3 stages that you may walk through in the waiting of your dream. Number 1 is darkness. Darkness, a place where it's desolate and depleted, dark and depressed, destroyed. And this is where Joseph ends up, in the bottom of a pit, the bottom of a cistern. The Bible tells us in Genesis 37:24, the cistern was empty and there was no water in it. Take a minute and imagine yourself sitting in the bottom of this pit. It's bottom of a cistern. Your brothers are up there. They're having a good old time, sitting around a fire, cooking, eating. And here Joseph is at the bottom of a pit. The only thing he's got is a dream that God gave him. Man, God spoke to me. I know it was him. He said that I'm going to do something. I'm going to accomplish something. I'm going to be something. Maybe he's spoken the same thing to you, and you look around and it just kind of feels like you're sitting in darkness. You look at what God has spoken to you about your future and the dream and the plans, but where you find yourself now just seems like it's so far from what the dream that God has given me. And right now, you just kind of look around, and it's just like, it just feels like I'm in darkness right now. This is where Joseph's at. Joseph's at a time in his life where, man, God spoke to him, but, man, it just seems like he's a million miles away from the dream that God gave him. So what do you do when your dream is delayed? Not even delayed, but man, in Joseph's case, it actually looks like he's going backwards. He's going further away from the dream that God gave him. What do you do when you feel like you're in a season of darkness? And in this season of darkness, I'm not talking about sin. No, I'm not talking about you being on the wrong path. In fact, you're on the right path, doing the right things, but you feel like you're surrounded by darkness, that everywhere you look, it's desolate and depleted. And maybe you're even wondering, what did I do wrong? What if you didn't, though? What if you're doing everything right? And this is exactly the place that God has for you. What if you need to walk through the darkness so God can mold you and shape you into the man or woman of God that you need to be so that you can step into that dream, that plan, and that purpose? What if you need to walk through the darkness so you can learn to lean on God and trust Him more? And if you read all throughout God's Word, you read all throughout it, you will see men and women who have had seasons of adversity, of darkness, and that they have to walk through so they can learn to trust God more than ever before. And I can tell you that Susie and I have walked through seasons of darkness, of wondering, God, why? Think back to 2000, I guess it would have been 2012, when Brooklyn underwent some tests, some genetic testing, that we were questioning the doctor, like, why are you having Brooklyn tested genetically? The doctor didn't tell us. She had some suspicions, but she didn't tell us. She just said, I just want to run these tests, and the doctor attended our church, and we trusted and knew her. We're like, all right. And then when we got the results of these genetic tests that she has a deletion in her chromosome, and her life is going to look much differently than your older two. Let me tell you, there was a season of darkness Susie and I had to walk through of questioning God. Why? Why? Why does she have to walk through this? What did we do? Are we not on the plan and the purpose? Are we not walking the way you've called us? We started questioning our lives, our decisions, and God's like, no, it's not about you and your decisions. This is just the path that I have for you. Let me tell you, we've come out stronger than ever before. And so maybe, just maybe, you're exactly where God needs you to be, to learn to trust him more than you ever have. Because understand this, God is not going to lead you somewhere to abandon you. His word says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So even in the midst of your darkness, when Joseph was sitting there at the bottom of that pit, God was with him. And maybe you feel like you're sitting in a moment and season of darkness, and it looks kind of a little bit depleted and desolate where you are. I want you to know that you're not alone. God will never leave you nor forsake you. It's the second stage that you might need to walk through, and we might all walk through when it comes to, in the waiting, when you're waiting to step into that dream or that plan or that purpose, is denial. Denial. See, in the waiting, it might feel like your delay is a denial. A delay is not a denial. And understand this, when I say delay, I'm talking about our perspective, not God's. Because God is never early, he's never late, he's always on time. But for us, it might feel like on this side of heaven that we're looking at the plans and the purposes that God has, and he gives you a dream, and it might feel like, well, it's delayed. So when I talk about a delay, I'm really talking about from our perspective, not God's. In Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9 says this, in their hearts, humans plan their course, right? Don't we? But the Lord establishes their steps. And so know this, that might feel like a delay for us, but it's not when it comes to God. Because it's us that expect things now, right? We expect things now in our 2-day prime Instacart DoorDash world. Like, we expect it now. Like, I could literally, on my tablet, DoorDash some McDonald's fries and have it here before I'm done preaching today. So just ignore the DoorDash guy if he comes in with some McDonald's fries, because that actually sounds really good right now. Right? We want things now. We want things, we want this, instantly. And so when we don't get it, we look at it as a delay, or even worse, we look at it as a denial. But a delay is not a denial. See, sure, Joseph was thrown into a cistern, then sold into slavery. I mean, everything about Joseph's life at this point would look like, your dream was denied. Like, that was just something you made up in your head that really didn't make sense, and you just missed the mark. But see, just because Joseph was sitting at the bottom of a cistern and then sold into slavery, doesn't mean that Joseph's dream was denied. It was just delayed. See, has God given you a dream that you thought would have come to fruition by now? A dream that you would have thought that you'd be living out right now? Are you in the waiting? Are you in the waiting? And when you are in that waiting period, don't listen to the lies of the enemy telling you that you've actually been denied. Don't listen to the lies of the enemy that say that you don't matter, that you're not good enough, that it's actually never going to happen. Because it's in the waiting where your resolve is going to be tested. It's in the waiting where the whispers of the enemy is going to be very tempting to listen to. It's in the waiting where we're going to have to learn to trust in God and lean on him. Because the whispers of the enemy, let me tell you, they're real. You'll hear them when you're in the waiting. In 2016, Susie and I were student ministry pastors at a church in a suburb of Chicago. And early that year, I felt like the Lord speak to me that God has called me to be a lead pastor. And so I talked to my pastor at the time, said, listen, I feel like God's, leading me to be a lead pastor. And, we kind of worked some things out, and we resigned as youth pastors. I think it was around June of 2016. I was interviewing at several different churches, and things just kind of looked like they were just all going to work out, a smooth transition from one into another, won't miss a beat, and be great. Except for that church that I was interviewing at came down to me and another pastor, and they chose the other pastor. And so I realized that, I'm probably going to have to get another job. It might be a couple more weeks or maybe a couple more months. And so there was a guy who owned a construction company. He did a lot of remodeling. He was a professional painter, and he kind of worked on his own. But he talked to me, said, hey, like I could, use a guy like you with your background. You know what you're doing, and you're reliable. And so I was able to go and start working for him. I'm like, oh, yeah. I said, I don't know. It could be weeks, could be months. I'm not sure. And he's like, no problem. Hey, as long, I got lots of work. So as long as you need. So, I began working for him, and man, being able to continue to provide for my family is really such a blessing. But the weeks that turned into a month, turned into 2 months, and turned into 3 months, and I'm interviewing at churches, and churches telling me no, 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 and 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months. Let me tell you, there's countless days that I'd be driving home from work in tears, wondering, God, did I miss it? Lord, did I make a mistake? Because you said that you gave me this dream, but it just doesn't seem to be happening. I know I can do construction. I know I could do it. I could make a living, but it's not the dream that you gave for me for my life. So what's going on? Begin to question God, question my dream, question my decisions, question everything. And God just spoke to me like, just trust me. I just need you to trust me. And then in June, I believe it was 2017, I sent my resume, which was about 18 months after God spoke to me about being a lead pastor, that I sent my resume to a church in Marcy, New York. So let me tell you, my delay wasn't a denial. It was, in fact, God's perfect timing. And as I said, God's timing is perfect every time. We just need to learn to trust Him. We need to learn to rely fully on Him. So don't lose heart in the waiting. In the waiting. So if you're in the waiting period, man, you might walk through some darkness, and might be tempted to believe that it's a denial, but it's not. It's just a delay on your end. Number 3, when you're in that waiting, you need to develop. You need to develop yourself. You need to develop your spirit, and practically. Because have you heard this term, dress for the job that you want, not the job that you have? It's an old term, it's an old saying, essentially saying, hey, you need to act and look like the job that you want to have, not necessarily the job that you have. And in essence, they're saying, hey, you need to act better, be better. You want to be a manager, then start, showing some leadership qualities when you're at work. Don't sit there and being, an employee, the lowest person on the totem pole, and just kind of, sitting there and shrugging your shoulders, oh, I wish I was a manager. Well, no, show some initiative, show some leadership ability that your owner or your manager can see inside of you. But man, it's even more important, you should prepare yourself for that next step. So what is that dream that God gave you? You should be preparing yourself both spiritually and practically. Are you learning and gaining the skills necessary to step into the dream that God has given you? And what if you haven't seen that dream realized is because you're actually not ready? What if the reason that you haven't seen that plan or that purpose come to fruition in your life is actually because you're not even ready to step into that plan or that purpose? Maybe practically, but also maybe spiritually as well. Worship team, you can go ahead and come back. Because often it's in that waiting is where we are molded and shaped into the men or women of God that we are called to be, so that we can see that dream realized. What needs developed in you? practical skills, leadership, education, spiritual disciplines, what needs to be developed in you in your prayer life, as your worship, your devotional life, listening to the leading of the Holy Spirit. Right now, we're in 21 days of prayer and fasting. I feel like 21 days just got a whole lot longer. It's like, oh, when you haven't started a fast, 21 days, it's not that long. No problem. 7 days in, you're like, 21 days? What was I thinking? This is a long time, right? But it's developing a spiritual discipline in your life to help your spirit grow. And it's in the waiting where we need to be strengthening ourselves, building our resolve and determination. In that waiting period, in that 18 months from when I felt like God speak to me that I was going to be a lead pastor until the time that I accepted a position here, I was preparing myself. I got my bachelor's degree. I was taking leadership courses, going to conferences. I was still discipling. Even though I wasn't a youth pastor, I was still discipling young men and meeting with them, having coffee with them, pouring into them. I wasn't just sitting there on the couch saying, okay, Lord, anytime now. Whenever, whatever church, wherever, I don't care, Lord, I'll go wherever. And that was my heart. God, I don't care where it is. The most important thing for me and my family is that we're in your will. I'll go wherever you want me to go. But no, I just didn't sit on the couch saying, woe is me. There were times. But I wanted to make sure I was ready. I wanted to make sure spiritually I was ready, but practically. There's some skills and some things that I need to gain and to learn. And you too. So the dream that God has for your life, you just don't want to sit around and wait for the dream, that you need to be bettering yourself. See, Peter says this in 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 to 8. He says this, for this reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness. I love the way he says it. But then when you get goodness, then you want to add knowledge. And then when you get some knowledge, you want to add self-control. And then to self-control, perseverance. And then perseverance, godliness. And then to godliness, mutual affection. And to mutual affection, love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. He's like, better yourself. Develop yourself. Make sure that you have goodness and knowledge and then self-control and then persevere. Like, add some things to you. Add some things to your faith. We need to be continually growing and developing as believers. Are you in a place today where it feels like your dream is delayed? Are you in the waiting? Don't be discouraged by your delay. Because let me tell you, your destiny is on the other side of your delay. But it's all about God's timing. Man, we all struggle with God's timing because we all want things a lot sooner than sometimes it seems like than God's timing. But it's where it comes to trust. I want you to go ahead and stand to your feet today. We need to learn to trust Him. So in the waiting, know that you might walk through some darkness. In the waiting, you might feel like your delay is a denial. And in the waiting, you need to develop yourself. And Psalms chapter 27, verse 14, I love what David writes here. He writes, wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart, and wait for the Lord. He's like, you're going to wait. Be strong, take heart, and you're going to wait. It's in the waiting where you're molded and shaped and developed into the man or woman that God has called you to be. So whether you feel like you're in darkness or that you've been denied or you're in this developing time, I want you to know that God is with you every single step of the way. So don't ever lose sight of this truth that whatever you face today, the Holy Spirit is with you. It's going to guide you. It's going to strengthen you. And it's all in God's timing. So I want you to go ahead and bow your head and close your eyes. And you would say, you know what, Pastor, I just feel like I'm in this waiting period right now. If that's you, I just want you to slip your hand up. Say, yeah, God's given me this dream, but I just feel like I'm in this waiting period that might even feel like it's delayed. The hands are going up all over the place. You can put your hands down. We're going to close with a song that's a reminder that God will never leave you nor forsake you, that He's with you. Even in the midst of adversity, even in the midst of darkness, even in the midst of it when it feels like I'm moving further away from my dream than towards it, He is with us. So we're going to go ahead and sing this song together, and we'll be back to close in just a minute.